And welcome to our panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's panel session. Our topic today is making connections, supercharging your association's networking activities, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But as usual, before I can jump into the actual questions, I do have a few quick logistics to cover. NX Unite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing, and the NX Unite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub for connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video on NX Unite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and of course, panels with experts such as these lovely folks here with me today. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. I see that there's already some questions in the chat, which is fantastic. Feel free to continue to submit them in the chat or in the questions tab. Either of them works, but I tend to recommend the questions tab as it is less likely to get lost there. We will be keeping an eye out for all those questions, and then the second half of the panel will be dedicated to answering as many as we possibly can in our time. So at any point during the panel, please feel free to submit those questions for that second half. If at any point you're having any technical difficulties, please let us know via the chat. My team member Anton is under the username Team NX Unite, and he will do his best to assist. So give a holler in the chat and we'll try to figure out what is happening. I did also want to say that this panel session is being recorded. So if you get to the end of the session and the insight you heard was just so fantastic, you need to hear it a second time right away. That's wonderful news. It'll automatically be in your email inbox after the session. So give it 5 to 10 minutes after we finish and it should be there. It will also be accessible on the NX Unite website in the on-demand panel section. So if you have any friends in the industry who you're like, can't believe they missed it, they needed to be there, that panel was designed for them, just send them that same registration page that you used and you'll be able to access the recording. All right, finally, before I introduce today's panelists, I do want to give a big thank you to our audience for attending. Already see a very lively chat, so I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Hope you get something from this panel, enjoy it, and again, submit those questions so we can tailor this session as much to your needs as we can. All right, first I'd like to introduce Vinnu Deshetty, event tech advocate at EVA. As founder and CEO, Vinnu brings over 20 years of experience working with conferences, meetings, and events. As a meeting planner, she understands the hurdles her industry peers encounter on a daily basis. As a techie, Vinnu knows that there are tools and tricks of the trade to help organizations overcome the unknowns of what will happen next. In an environment where technology is quickly changing and the nature of meetings is evolving, Vinnu leads EVA's team of meeting planners and developers that takes the guesswork out of meeting planning. Raised as a coal miner's daughter in Western Kentucky, Vinnu learned the value of hard work and community, experiencing how a community rallies together in good times and bad, and she knows that the meetings industry will champion again. Vinnu obtained a Bachelor of Science degree from Vanderbilt University and a Master of Public Administration. She now works and resides in the Washington, D.C. area with her fierce feminist daughters and her sidekick, Toby, the Wonder Dog. So glad you could be here, Vinnu.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to hearing from not only our panelists, but everyone who's joining us. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Vinnu. Also joining us is Lee Gimpel, who is the founder and CEO and principal of Better Meetings in Washington, D.C. The firm helps organizations turn meetings from boring and unproductive to engaging and effective, be they staff meetings, board meetings, retreats, or annual conferences. His work blends meeting facilitation, audience engagement, collaborative innovation, and human-centered design. Great to have you, Lee.
Thanks for having me. We should all go out for drinks after this.
Sounds good. Finally, we have Teri Carden, creator of Dues-a-Palooza. Teri is an association junkie and a self-proclaimed girl geek in normal girls' clothing. After several years of experience in the association technology role, Teri created resources in the association space, including ReviewMyAMS.com, AMS Fest, 100 Reviews, and now an industry event to help bring new non-dues revenue ideas to curious association professionals through Dues-a-Palooza. Teri is an early adopter, disruptor, and explorer, and loves coaching associations to bring new ideas to life. So glad to have you, Teri.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for having me today. Welcome, Lee and Vinnu. I'm so excited to do this with y'all today. And hi, everybody.
Awesome. So we do want to make sure we hear from you all in the audience too. I know you're already introducing yourself with names and organizations, so please continue to do that if you have yet to. Share any suggestions or tips you may have for other people working on improving their networking within their association. And of course, submit those questions so we can get to as many as possible. All right, we are going to jump in with our questions. And Teri, I'm going to have you start us off with our very first one. Why is talking about and being strategic about networking opportunities so crucial for associations?
I love this question, and what a good way to get started. I've been in the association realm for a long time. I've been around meetings for over 15 years, and it is without a shadow of a doubt, it will always sit at the top of the results whenever an association does a survey to its members, right? Like, what is your number one benefit for being a part of this association? And I'd be really, really surprised if it doesn't sit in either number one or number two of all of the people are here. As a matter of fact, if you want to chime in and say, like, tell me if networking is not at the number one or number two slot for member benefit for your association. So with that all by itself, just that relevance, the power of the relevance of us bringing our members together is crucial, right? So we've got to get it right. And networking is something actually really hard to measure, right? How is it that we can measure this? Where we're measuring it because our members are telling us that it's important to them. But frankly, really, when we get down to it, when we start thinking about the brass tacks of why our members are coming together, whether it's in a virtual or an in-person environment, really what it comes down to is, as humans, like, even if we just take that layer of, our professional profiles, even if we take that away and we just look at the human element of who we are, we're looking for people to celebrate with and commiserate with. And ultimately, when associations bring people together, that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to find someone that looks like them, that can understand them, that whenever they shout that celebration at the top of the hill, they have somebody else that's standing behind them going, heck yeah, you did it. And I know what that feels like. Or on the flip side, sometimes, failures happen. And the people that are in your world are the people that understand the most and are usually there to rally and help. So commiseration and celebration, I think, are the two lenses that associations should look through when they're planning strategically for networking events, because members say that it is one of their favorite member benefits.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for starting this off, Teri. Vinnu, I'm going to have you jump in with the same question, as it is kind of, why are we here today? Why is this so important to talking about?
I agree with Teri. I think that's the number one reason why events and conferences and meetings came to be, is to bring us together, not only to from a technical standpoint of learning whatever it is that we need from our industry, but learning also through that networking of having that support, that sense of belonging, that sense of someone else understands what I'm going through, or I can be supportive. There's some people that are caretakers, right? Some people are givers, some people are takers. Same thing in networking. And it's just a matter, and that's why people come to those. And that's not only for in-person, it's also for virtual as well. And I think a lot of times we think of networking as something that's has to be done face to face, where we can shake hands. But as technology improves, we're seeing you make those connections on social media like LinkedIn. But how do you go beyond that? Whether do you translate that to other virtual experiences? Do you translate that to an in-person? How do you do that? And how, as an organization, do you curate that and encourage that? It's very daunting if you're not a networker, How do you get into that space and how do you do it? So it's our job as planners, as the organizers, to create and curate that possibility for them.
Fantastic, Vinnu. All right, Lee, I want to hear from you as well. Why are we here today? Why is this so important?
The first thing I'll say is like, I met Teri and Vinnu like through networking stuff. So like in a way, I guess we're all here because of that. And I woke up and I was so excited that I get to be on a panel with them. And I realized that they're going to be really smart and say a lot of the stuff that I would say. So I think I'm going to sort of short this answer and just say, like, why does networking matter? And particularly for associations, I think in many cases, it's the reason people pay their money, right? Like, why am I part of an association? It's to be part of these other people. And I was just looking at the attendees, and right, you've got Coin Laundry, Airports Council, Hispanic nurses, right? It's like, it's the only place where you get to sort of commune with the other people who care about this like little topic. And I think, this is just where the value comes from. I mean, to Teri's initial point here is like, it's always at the top of the list. And I think not just we are a lot of events people here, but it's not just events, right? It's membership, and it's like this whole big world of associations. So yeah, I mean, it's where we find jobs. It's where we, share knowledge and learn new things. And I think it tends to happen by people connecting to other people more than sitting in rooms watching PowerPoints. I'm going to keep saying that, but I'm going to go short on that answer and hopefully get to more because of it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Lee. Vinnu, I'm going to have you start us off with this next question. How can our associations help members authentically engage with networking rather than just showing up to check off a box? And are there any common mistakes you want to warn associations against?
Sure. And I think, planning networking events is not something that's new because of the pandemic or even post-pandemic. I think we have all been struggling with this for decades, for centuries, of how do you get people together? How do you make them aware of it? What kind of activity do you do? Who do you bring together? It's all something that's always on top of our minds. And I think as we think about that, as a planner or as an organizer, you've got 100 things you've got to plan out. You've got to plan out your schedule. You've got to plan out your F&B. There's just tons on your plate. A lot of times networking events falls to the bottom of that list. And it's kind of funny that it falls to the bottom of the list, even though it's the most important to your attendees. So what I'm suggesting is flip that model and plan with intent, plan with the networking events in mind, as opposed to saying, oh, we're just going to have a reception after all the sessions and everybody's invited. And that's our networking event. Lee and I have talked about this a lot. Instead of just throwing it out there, be a little bit more cognizant of, we need to bring people together. And what is the best way to do that? How do our attendees identify themselves in terms of wanting to network with each other? Is it educational? Is it pain point wise? Or is it a commonality of like, I'm from Kentucky, or I went to school here, but finding that commonality that brings them together and planning whatever networking event around that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vinnu. All right, Lee, over to you. How can we support authentic engagement?
I mean, I would say put it at the top of the list. I'm just going to keep echoing what Vinnu says. But I think a lot of times we're just checking the box and it's not particularly authentic. And we say, we're doing networking, and people go, yes, networking. And then it turns out it's just a waiting room, right? It's just like an empty room before the event starts, and people mill around and they look at their phone and they're like, I'm not really feeling connected here. So I think we really want to get people to connect about things that matter with people that matter to them, rather than just saying, there's a cheese plate, go walk around the cheese plate and hope that somebody talks to you. I think it's not just putting out food. It's not just, putting time in the calendar of saying like, there's a coffee break. I hope you go and do stuff. I think as the head of the membership, department, or the head of the event, or the event organizer, I think you really have to be intentional about connecting people. And I think you take on this role as host at a dinner party or at a cocktail party, where it's up to you to make this event great, rather than just saying, well, I brought the food, I brought the drink, good luck. And I think, to Vinnu's point, it often ends up at the bottom of like, well, we'll schedule the speakers and we'll, get the food, and then like, hope networking happens. I put it at the top, right? I think it's super valuable, to Teri's point about number one or number two. So.
Definitely. All right, Teri, anything you want to add in terms of authentic engagement?
Yeah, for sure. So, it does need to be put at the top. If we're looking at it, from the perspective of the members about what's most important to them, then how can we tailor that so that it's a meaningful time for them? And I think sometimes in associations, we get so trapped in doing things cookie cutter, doing things kind of the way we've always done them. Just because our members come in suits and ties and, outfits that like look overtly polished does not mean they don't want to have fun. Fun is not frivolous. I feel like that has got to be a takeaway for today is that, associations can't get trapped in the, exactly what Lee said, like throwing a cheese board out and having everybody put a sticky name badge that, by the way, gets stuck in my hair. I end up walking around with it like on the top of my head or on my back or something by the time I leave any event. But it's a place where you can generate meaningful connection and around fun. Fun is not frivolous. And so, how can you bring people together? Yes, throw down a cheese plate, but also make it fun. And I'm going to keep coming back to this like your attendees are humans too. So, how can you bring the personal elements into the space, right? So, a couple of examples that I might want to give about this. Like, so let's pretend you've got a speaker that you're going to introduce, or a sponsor, or something like that. You can read their bio, so everybody in the room kind of knows who they are. But you know what really connects people with that person is a fun fact. So anytime I have to introduce anybody, whether it's in a virtual world or in person, you better believe I'm going to force them to give me some sort of fun fact. Humans are interesting people. And if you share with them, some little fun facts about themselves, then that can create a commonality. One of the ideas that I put into play was I held at Dues-a-Palooza, we had a little drop-in happy hour type of thing. And on the name badge, I left a blank space after the words, ask me about. So they had their name on the name badge and then it said, ask me about blank. And they can put anything they want to there. So if they want to stay in the professional lane and have it be about something that's professional, cool. If they want it to be about something personal, how cool would it be if you found somebody that said, ask me about my 18 dachshunds and you have dachshunds at home. Yeah, here we go. Peptide signaling and mountain biking and mentoring programs. Yeah. Ask me about these things. And that as an element that brings the humanity and the fun into the networking opportunities.
Wonderful. I think the chat is in total agreement about the importance of fun. So thank you, Teri. All right, Liam, have you start us off with this next question. What do you see as the difference between in-person versus online networking? And can you even really do networking online?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would say is like, it's basically the same, right? We're trying to do the same sort of things. And I think people throw up their hands and say, we couldn't possibly do networking online. And you're like, well, it's just talking to people and we can do that, right? A lot of times it gets messed up. But, I think when people look at real events, they go, it only happens in hallway moments. And how could we possibly have a hallway moment online? And you say, those hallway moments often don't work. Those hallway moments are where I know Teri and I walk down the hallway together. We're not meeting somebody new or engaging with something different. But yeah, I think you have to be really intentional. I think being online forces you to be intentional. I know Vinnu and I've talked about this a lot because she's doing a lot of this work. So you don't get the moments at lunch because there isn't lunch, and you don't get the moments in the hall because there aren't the halls, and there aren't, these moments where you get to just turn to somebody next to you because you're not sitting next to somebody. So it really, I think, falls onto the shoulders of the person who's doing this work, who's organizing this online event, to say, how do we build spaces for people to come together and engage authentically and in a real way? And I can tell you what it's not. It's not just chat, right? Chat's fine, but it's not just chat. And it's certainly not just like unattended chat where we just leave a room open and we're like, it's the networking lounge and there's just a chat that just looks like people going, hi from New Jersey. That doesn't do much, right? It's not 50 people in a room trying to have one conversation, right? I mean, there's a lot of places where it goes wrong, but I think if we say, we're a group of 3 or 4 people, it's really easy for us to have a nice, good conversation. Breakout rooms are great. There's lots of opportunities to do it. You just have to program it in, and you can't just throw your hands up and say, it's online. We couldn't possibly do it. You can. I mean, that I'm here, that I met Teri, and that I met Vinnu online, right? I think is a testament. And as I'm looking at, the chat here, many of those people that I know, we've also met online over the last couple of years. So like, it works. You just have to be intentional about it.
Definitely. Thank you, Lee. Teri, anything you want to add to this kind of in-person versus online networking conversation?
I do. So it's really interesting. I looked back on some notes that I wrote. Man, this was back like early pandemic days, and I sometimes will keep a journal in kind of more tumultuous times of my life, and so I was keeping a journal both personally and professionally. And this is what I wrote. I said, well, I think associations took the first 60 days of this mess to try and figure out how to work from home. Then they took the next 30 to 60 days to figure out programming, like events, and decide what the heck to do with them. And now we're finally seeing organizations emerge with virtual and even a few in-person events are popping their heads out. Where associations are doing really well is looking for solutions and the tech to help support those virtual experiences. Much like Bespeak is here with us today, actually, and other companies that were creating tools, for associations to bring them together and collaborate in a virtual environment. But where they're actually falling short is the experience part. I mean, let's face it, pulling together virtual events is not easy. There's a lot of moving parts. But I said that. I found those notes the other day, and I was like, wow, okay, that's kind of helpful in light of today's conversation, because it's sort of a little flashback to where we were. And now think about all of the ideas that have bubbled to the surface of how we can bring our members together in a virtual environment and have it be fun and have it be meaningful and have them walk away with potential business opportunities. One time I was on a networking little Zoom call one day, and one of the points that was made by one of the sponsors was like, hey, there's 5 sponsors here, and there's 25 prospects basically here. What's really tough about this right here is that we're all in this room and only one person can talk at a time. Whereas when you think about the in-person networking opportunity, we can all be standing there next to each other, but you have these little pockets of conversations and side conversations. You're all together, but you're separate. And so being careful of one person monopolizing that conversation in the virtual environment is what really kind of changes that game. And so I think when associations are thinking about what the virtual environment looks like for networking, yes, can it work? Absolutely. Does it work the same as what we do in person? Like, no, we've just got to think a little differently about how we can bring people together in those, and then maximize the opportunities that we have in the virtual environment for networking, right? Oh my gosh, associations can walk away with a ton of information by sitting around people, like around a chat room like this one. We've got the chat going like crazy here. We've got polling opportunities, so we can immediately get business intel. This really changes the game from a networking perspective so that it brings more back to the association and the organization that's running it to help dictate or help give insights about the future of what our members are going to want to talk about and see. And then, back again, like I think sometimes there are things in the virtual environment that are easier to pull off than they are in person. And so just being very intentional with what it is that you're doing when you're considering in person or online, I think is really kind of where it's at. Just like being mindful of what works well in person does not necessarily always work well in the virtual environment. But ultimately, my life value, my rock of how I live by is you have to take care of the people that take care of you. So no matter what, whether you're in virtual or you're in person, you got to treat people like they're people, because everybody's human here. So we keep coming back to that one.
Great. Thank you, Teri. Vinnu, slightly different question for you. What should associations consider when they want to evaluate their current networking practices?
Absolutely. Well, I think, we're talking a lot about intent, and I think the questions come up in chat. It's like, what does that mean? Like, yeah, I want to think about it, but what do I think about? And I know from, the data geek in me says, look at the data, and it really is there. You may have to think about what data you need to look at, but you really do. You have three sources of your data to look at. You've got your AMS or your CRM. So you've got your member data or your non-member data, and you're able to see who they are, kind of create these profiles of who's attending. You've got your registration data, so you know who's coming and collecting that information as well. And then if you are using any kind of event platform, whether it's for virtual, hybrid, or in person, you've got the opportunity, I would say almost 99% of the platforms out there have the opportunity where you can create your profile or bring in your LinkedIn profile. So you've got these three sets of data. So now it's a matter of taking a look at them and saying, what's the commonality between those three? And it doesn't have to be a hard exercise. It can just be kind of very overall surface and say, who are my people? What connects them together? Again, is it by industry, pain point, a specific, another type of commonality? But integrate those questions into your analysis. And so if you do want to do it by geographic region, pull it out of your AMS and say, okay, we have a third people coming from the East Coast, a third from the Midwest, however that is. But then go one step further and make sure that when you're looking at the people that are coming to the event and you're planning networking events based on region, you're also looking at that same kind of data to bring it all together. But I look at the data and look at that. Look at what's worked in the past. Just from, if you don't have data, just look at what's worked. You've done surveys, most likely. See what people like, they don't like. See what you've got in your data, and then see how you can bridge that gap with the data, because you're going to find out that you've probably been planning for people that aren't there, or you can better plan for those that you will be most activated. One example, sorry, I'm going long, but one example could be where people who respond and say, I want more networking events, look at that subset of data and say, who are they? These people want networking, and cater that networking based on what they're looking for, because they're going to be your best advocates and they're going to be your ambassadors to do more networking, get people involved, and treat each other like humans, like Teri is saying. Like, they're ones that are going to really embrace the concept and be your cheerleaders.
Can I just add, I think when people talk about intention, it's often not intentional. People say, we just gave you a room. That's not intentional. And if we just say, well, they just met, like anyone in the room met. But if we talk about a typical buyer seller, buyers and sellers in a room, to what Vinnu is talking about, sellers don't want to meet other sellers. They're really happy when they get to meet buyers. And we can stack the deck to make that happen, but it takes a little bit more thought than just everybody go into the room and I hope you get lucky. So I think that's part of the intention question or answer.
Definitely. Thank you, Lee. Vinnu, I have a follow-up question for you. For our associations who've evaluated, they've reviewed, but are ready to be really kind of innovative with their networking and exceed their members' expectations, do you have any advice or insights?
I do. Look at technology. I'm always going to be the one that says, use the tools that you have to help you do what you want to do. And a lot of platforms have not only the ability to post attendee directories, opt in, of course, you want to be GDPR compliant, but you have attendee directories, but go beyond that. Look at what matchmaking opportunities they are. Make it easy for people to find each other. Just like with in-person events, if you've got thousands of people in a room, how do you possibly find the people that you want? And Teri gave some good examples of how you can do that with name badges and having fun activities where you find that commonality. Do the same thing. But what I like about some of this with the technology pieces is that you can do this before even the conference happens, whether it's in person, virtual, or hybrid. You can set this up for success in advance, let's say a month, whatever you deem is right. I typically like to say about a month. Get people excited about it beforehand. Have them make those connections before they come to the conference. So when they do come to the conference, they've already made that connection and they've already see a friendly face across the room, and they can make that connection. They're like, oh, we've been talking on LinkedIn or on our event platform, but it's been intentional. And then that is something that you as the organization have really championed. You can't just put an attendee directory out there and say, okay, here's who's coming. You've actually got to give concrete ideas to the attendees on how to use it. And it can just be as easy as, here are 3 top ways of how to make your best connections while you're at the conference, and just list those out. Don't leave it up for chance. Tell your attendees what they need to do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vinnu. Lee, question for you. How or where can we actually fix networking during a typical association event like an annual conference?
Where do we start? So, I mean, I did this the other day. I asked ChatGPT. I was like, ChatGPT, give me the, an agenda for a 2-day conference. And it gives you exactly what you would think. The executive director or the board person speaks first. And then there's like a coffee break. And then there's breakouts. And then there's like lunch. And then there's a plenary speaker. I mean, we've all seen this structure a million times. And super simple. One of the things I really like to do is say, okay, if we're trying to establish that people need to talk and meet and connect, and that's the vibe that we're going for here, let's not wait until the evening reception for that to happen or something, right? So very first thing that we often do is we say, just turn to your neighbor. This is like the oldest trick in the book, but just turn to your neighbor. And like, I'm sitting next to Vinnu and just, why are you here? And you like, honestly, you get this like 1 minute or like this quick sigh of people go, I got to turn to my neighbor, right? And then there is this warm buzz that fills this whole room of everybody being engaged and active and talking. And it turns out the person sitting next to you is amazing. You have this great talk. And then, 4 minutes later, you go, okay, stop. We're going to, start the conference now. People don't want to stop. They are super excited. And then you've now multiplied the number of just connections in the room. I mean, it's like the oldest trick in the book, but I think that's a really easy one. Anytime we see something like coffee break, let's not just turn people loose and hope that they figure it out. Let's do something. And then I think, a lot of what we do is we make things collaborative. We've had that point earlier is, can we work on something together, right? If we got everybody in this room, there's like 80 or something people here, and we said, we're going to put you all in small groups briefly and have you think about the best ways to improve annual conferences or networking. I mean, Barbara and Felicity and James are all like in this group together. We're not calling it networking. We're calling it thinking of ideas, but they're all going to meet each other and they're going to engage after that. It takes very little work as an organizer to make that happen. There are hundreds of ways to do it. And inevitably what we see is like the same old conference replayed over and over again. And people go, again, this year we didn't get good networking because we keep doing it the same. And let's just change a few things. Boy, we could talk all day about this, but I'm going to cede the floor now.
I know we might need a part 2 to this panel session. There's a lot of questions that have already come in. Teri, I want to ask you as well, any advice for kind of upping the annual conference and fixing networking?
Yeah, I definitely want to echo what Lee said in terms of creating just unique experiences. But, going back to the fun is not frivolous, I just can't help but to then just take that and just one up myself and be like, not only just have fun, but you want to create an experience that people are not expecting. So I started thinking when I was thinking about presenting today and being with y'all, I started thinking about what is that inside me that makes me want to give people something unexpected when they come to my house or when they come to an event of mine. And what is that? Like, why do I crave giving them that element of surprise, And I think it's just, I like surprises myself. And I know not everybody likes surprises. I get that. But if you can create that wow factor or that layer of like, oh my gosh, I totally was not expecting that. And I started thinking about some of the planners that I know, and they plan really big events. And, it's just this giant to-do list of, all of the things they've got to get through in order to get on the other side, to get to that, like, the very last day, on the second part of that last day, and then you can just, breathe that sigh of relief, all of the things are done, but how, like, what we want to do is we want to take all of those items in our checklist and we want to relay that to our members so that they know what's coming, right? They know what to expect. They know what they're paying for. We want to put it all out there. But if you can just hold back a couple of cards, so that you can have some element of surprise for your attendees. I think that's really sometimes what has them walking away with that wow factor. And I'll share an example. I think a couple of you have chimed in on the chat and been asking about what is this icebreaker idea that Teri has done. So last year at Dues-a-Palooza, I grabbed a bottle of wine. I'm not going to lie, this is how I really did it. But before I grabbed a bottle of wine, I had a round robins or roundups with all of my speakers and all of my sponsors. And on these roundups that I had prior to these virtual roundups that I had prior to the event, I asked them, I said, just tell me what is your favorite sports team or your favorite kind of candy, or do you have a dog or a cat? Very simple, right? And I just kept a little running list on my desk of like, oh, so-and-so said they like the Cubs. Oh, so-and-so said they liked Arizona State. Oh, they like gummy, like Sour Patch Kids or whatever. So I kept this list, and so then what I did was then I grabbed my bottle of wine and I went to Amazon and I found all these teeny tiny little tchotchkes and things that I knew would be meaningful to these people. And I took little bags and I put little notes on them, and I said, hey, find James Marquis. I hear he loves dark chocolate. And I put that little note in there. And then for everybody else, I just put, find someone that likes milk chocolate and make their day. Find someone that has a cat and make their day with this cat toy. Find somebody that has, a kid and, make their day with this little toy. And I put all these little trinkets and little bags of giveaways, I put them all in giant basket. And so when we broke for lunch, which was a networking lunch, surprise, everybody got one of these little bags on their way out the door. And they weren't expecting this in the middle of the event. Like, oh, we're just going to lunch. But they picked up a little bag and it said, find Joanna Pineda, her favorite color is purple, and make her day. And so this person then had to search the room over during lunchtime and hand a gift to Joanna. And what does that do? That now creates a meaningful connection. It's not just oh, I hear you like skiing. Let's talk about your next ski trip. It's like that when you give someone a gift, that creates a different spark between those two. And so basically it was this giant gift giving moment over lunch that people weren't expecting. And people got to meet other people. Now I'll tell you a funny, one of the sponsor speakers actually kept taking hers and going and put it back in the basket so that people would pick it up and want to give it to her. So she actually maximized her efforts, which was really smart and clever on her part. But there are just ways that you can have your members walking away with some meaningful moments that don't cost that much and are not that hard to pull off. And it was a really good bottle of wine, so that helped.
Can
I just add, there's that moment where you talk about Joanna, who's here. Hi, Joanna. And, I think there's moments where the four of us are obviously on stage, but the more you can bring people into the mix, right? If we could bring Joanna up right now, all of a sudden for the rest of this conference or the rest, in theory, right? People would come up and be like, oh my God, I saw you were the person who was up there. You're the person that people talked about. And you sort of share that spotlight. And I think we're sort of unintentionally doing that. And good job, Teri.
Yeah. And, to that point, Lee, a lot of times with our events, we're leaving award ceremonies and recognitions to the end of the event. I mean, you can do something as simple as moving that towards the beginning of the event. So some of these people are recognizable, especially mentees, the first time award winners, or you're trying to get more engagement. Give that recognition in the front end so people can make connections with them and they can make connections with other people. It's just one of the low-hanging fruit that you've got that you can implement. I mean, I get that planners have a lot on your plates, and to actually facilitate a meaningful connection, like Teri, this is your thing. And then you spent time to think about, this is what I'm going to do. You put intent behind it, right? You made a plan, and you were really thoughtful in what was going to work and how you were going to implement this. A lot of planners just don't have the time for that. And that's okay. I'm not saying that you have to have time, but but you have resources, right? Whether it's within your organization, board members, or even outsourcing it. Get facilitators who specialize likely in networking and in engagement and that kind of thing. It's okay to ask for help for that. And when you're encouraging others to get involved, just makes for a better experience because you're bringing outside eyes into the situation as well. And again, you get those ambassadors, and they're going to be championing and cheerleading this effort. So don't think as a planner you're adding something else on your to-do list. Yeah, your to-do list is going to be finding that someone, but it's a lot easier to get someone to help you than to actually have to do it yourself.
But I think, you can make that conscious choice, right? Like, I think Teri's doing both, but you could say, do we need one more speaker? Do we need one more session? Or could we have like the gift giving session and people walk away and they're like, oh my God, the gift giving session, I met all these people, and like, that may have more value than one more PowerPoint or one more speaker.
Yeah. So people are asking in the chat, I see you guys, like, what are some other ideas where we can bring people together kind of in this meaningful way that's that element of surprise? You're getting ready to go to a break. Yeah, I was at an event one time and I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. People say when we break bread together, when we eat together, it creates a bond, right? Okay, we're all sitting around a lunchroom tent top, that's cool. But the rule needs to be you need to get somebody else their drink. You cannot get your own drink. You either have to ask for somebody else to get your drink, or you need to offer to get somebody else their drink. That's so tiny. We all have to get a drink at lunch, right? But just enforcing this moment of where somebody has to give someone that, and it's so simple. You don't even have to sit down and stuff bags full of, keychains and, purple squishy balls, It's just creating some of those elements where humans can interact with humans in a meaningful way.
Fantastic. All right, time is racing on. And so I'm officially entering what I'm going to call our speed round, where we're going to try to get through as many of the questions that have come in via the questions tab and the chat as possible. Lee, I'm going to have you start us off with this first question. People are looking for tips for small group networking in not ideal physical spaces, i.e. like a movie theater.
Yeah, I don't know who it came from, but I know there's somebody here that we talked about this, so it's fresh on my mind. Yeah, I mean, so I inherit a lot of spaces that are not perfect, and then we try and work with them. And I think to Teri's point, like, how do we just get people to be human? So even if we're sitting in chairs and those chairs are bolted down, you can turn to somebody else next to you and you can say, who are you, right? I've been doing a lot of stuff that's like walking lately, right? We don't like the space that we're in. Can we walk around the convention center? Can we walk around the block, right? Can we do little pairs together? And then can we come back together? Often like hallways are really usable and we can put up stuff in the hallway. But I think, a lot of times it's forcing that interaction. It's causing something to be collaborative, right? Sometimes we'll put a big board up in the lobby and we'll have people come up with, their sticky notes, and they'll put stuff up on it. And it's a moment where we kind of don't care what they're putting up on there. What we care about is that, I'm putting it up and Joan Eisenstadt, hi Joan, is putting one up right next to me. And I go, oh my gosh, you also like this thing. And we have this moment, and it's not dependent on having some great space. We're in like remnant hallway space, I think. Yeah, I mean, the spaces are often bad, but I think if you have the ability to adapt what you're doing to the space, it's fine. If you just say, we have to sit theater style and it always has to be this same way, you end up with the same event that you've always had. And then people get frustrated and say, again, we wanted more networking this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Question for you, Vinnu, from the chat. My org has some restrictions on chat interactions due to privacy policies, but our virtual audience is always asking for ways to communicate together and engage more together and with the panelists. What can I do?
Yeah, if you can't use chat and you can't use discussion forums, consider making breakout rooms where they're actually connecting in real time, whether it's virtual, in the virtual environment. So whether you use, let's say, like a Zoom meeting, and then you break it down to different rooms, or you actually intentionally set up different sessions with the intent that it's for networking and it's for fun. I think those are ways around it. Also, being really encouraging people to share their information with others who they want to share their information with, right? You don't want to share it with a stalker, but you may want to share it with someone that's got a commonality, a problem that you share. Share that information with using, again, the technology that you have, whether it's through the event platform, LinkedIn, through email, whatever. But again, encouraging people to use personal connections. And again, knowing that if you have an attendee group that has limitations, and Joan, thank you for always bringing up with disabilities and accessibility and all of that, taking that into consideration and also letting other people know that that's something of concern. Some people just may not know, but being able to put that out there and say, we do have people in our group that may not be able to use chat, so be cognizant of that. But here are the alternatives. Just don't make them aware, but give them the plan to do something else.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vinnu. Teri, a question from the chat as well. In what ways have you worked with speakers for physical or virtual events to encourage interactive learning to facilitate networking, as well as learning the topics presented?
Ooh, okay. Speakers. Okay, so I use a tool called Gather Voices, which allows sponsors and speakers that are participating in non-Dues-a-Palooza to have a voice prior to the event. So they get to come on and say something really fun, of course. We're not going to leave the fun out of it, but they can kind of tease their content a little bit, or tease their product or service that they're providing. Also, I like to give people who are going to be on stage a little space to be themselves. Sometimes that might be even giving them a prop, like a cowboy hat, or a silly blingy necklace, or something that like says, hey, it's okay to kind of let loose with this crowd and be yourself. And a lot of times what that does is that brings to light personality. And then people are naturally drawn to people with personalities. I actually had a guy on stage this last non-Dues-a-Palooza who was presenting a case study, and he came out to Superman music, and he ended up stripping all the way down to a Superman costume underneath his jacket and his professional attire. And just giving people that space to be themselves and show their uniqueness makes it a lot of fun, and it makes it more memorable. And that gives your speakers and your sponsors that opportunity to shine in a unique way outside of the value proposition that they bring to the table, right? It makes them memorable. And I'll keep scheming for a second. I'm trying to think of some other ways that I've been able to put my speakers and sponsors in a place where they had unique opportunities to showcase what it is that they do. Maybe some people that have attended my stuff over here can help remind me.
Can I jump in here? This is like, it's not high tech, but I mean, I use this all the time. It's like so old and beat up now, but a lot of times we design conferences around, like, I introduce Colleen talks for 45 minutes, and then we take a couple minutes of questions at the end. I mean, we're taking like 20 minutes of questions today, which is kind of nice. But if we change it, we just say, like, I'm going to introduce Colleen's going to talk for a bit. We do an interview, and then we do some breakouts, or we do some like the audience talks, and then we drive the rest of it from there, and you can put your speaker, Colleen can walk around and can do this. And, I think it's just like, there's this moment of interaction in the middle that it's not high tech, but it also lessens the load on that speaker to say, can you do a 45-minute PowerPoint? Ooh, I don't know. Can you do a shorter PowerPoint? Can you answer questions? Like, it's much easier for us to answer questions and to prepare, a PowerPoint. None of us wanted to prepare a PowerPoint for this today, I think.
Truth.
Glad to hear it. You're not feeling deprived of not having a PowerPoint. That is good to know. Awesome. Question for you, Vinnu. This actually came in with our registration questions, but any advice for particularly tailoring your networking to your specific organization?
In terms of, so I think, again, just looking at who's coming and who wants to engage in that way. I think there are two sets of people that do come to network, not to conferences and events, right? There are those that do want to network and want to get to know other people. there may be a subsegment of people who are just there for education, and that's okay. It's okay not to force them to socialize and network because they're coming there for a different purpose, but to actually understand that and know that. But then who you're targeting and what kind of events to plan for that. But really be cognizant of, of figuring that piece out. And that could be, we all love surveys, but when you are doing surveys or you are reaching out or you are doing focus group, just ask the question, what do you consider fun? Some people may say skydiving is fun, but, maybe sitting around having a glass of wine is what I consider as fun. Now, skydiving with wine may be a different story, but I think ask the question, you don't have to work in a bubble where you have to figure it out on your own. And I would also be cautious with that, though. I say on one hand, ask people. But when you're asking your board, be conscious that your board, are they representative of the people that you're trying to cater to? So just kind of keep that in mind. But I know in the chat, someone talked about, or one of the questions was about how do you get your sponsors involved? Involve them in the conversation and say, hey, this is not a sales pitch. This is not an opportunity for you to do a hardcore commercial, but what interesting ideas do you have that could encourage interaction between people? What, do you have ideas? You go to conferences. What have you seen? I will tell you, there are some very creative sponsors out there, and they will come back with ideas. And that you don't have to do them, but it is a starting point for a conversation. And I think sponsorship has come a long way. Sponsorship is no longer a 4-letter bad word. Sponsorships can be, they get so much more out of something where you do make those meaningful connections and relationships as opposed to that commercial sell. So definitely look to them as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, we are rapidly running out of time. And so I have 2 questions that I'm going to try to sneak in so we can hear from each of our panelists 2 more times before we finish up this session. I think there's been a lot of conversation about keeping ideas that you can do when you're really busy. A lot of our association professionals are really busy. There's not a lot of extra time to dedicate to various things. So I'm hoping we can get like a kind of small nugget of information of some advice that could be a small change that could potentially have a really big impact for our associations. Teri, could I start off with you for this one?
Sure thing. Okay, so I think I have to go back to just if your attendees are leaving with something that they didn't come in with other than the expectation that they came in with, right? They came in with an expectation, but if you can have them leaving with that you met their expectation plus a little bit more, that's gonna be what keeps them coming back for more, right? And think about this. Our attendees, time is a gift right now. Okay. It is the greatest gift. When you give your time, these people that are here in this chat, the 4 of us here today, when we give our time, this is truly a gift now more than ever. And with every single birthday that I have that passes, I feel this is more and more true. And if we think about the fact that every single person that is coming into our rooms, whether it's virtual or it's in person, that they're giving a gift, that just changes the game, and you want to give them a gift and something unexpected back. I want to share this quote that was shared with me by an attendee that came to one of my first virtual events during the COVID times. And this is kind of the power that you can have with making impact on people to make them feel included. He says, I enjoyed the post-conference conversation just as much, if not more. I'm extremely introverted. So if I had gone to a happy hour in person, I would have probably sunk into a dark corner somewhere and tried to stay invisible. Virtually, however, I really enjoyed the conversation. And it's really about making people feel loved and wanted and that they're coming to get what they got out of it, plus a little bit more.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Teri. All right, over to you, Vinnu. Any small changes that could potentially have a really big impact?
I go back to the data. I know it may seem like a daunting task, but really take the time to look what's there. And it can be very high level, but look at that. That's going to tell you some stories. And if you have a hard time with that, there's going to be a data geek in your organization. Ask them for some help, and they're going to find some good nuggets for you in there.
Wonderful. All right, over to you, Lee. Small change, big impact.
Small change, big impact. All right, I got 3 things, a couple of which I just keep sitting next to me for occasions like this. So this is what name tags usually look like, right? We got a name, we got a title, and we've got some organization. I think that's Cal State Monterey or something. That does not tell me I should talk to that person. And it takes very little effort to change a name tag to, Teri was talking about this earlier, I think, right? Like to add a couple little things that get people to engage. This is not blowing up your conference. It's changing name tags. That's super simple. Again, I would sprinkle small groups over the whole conference. I mean, I think it's just really easy to insert that and put up some guardrails and say, maybe more than just regular roundtables, but something like that, right? I think it's just much easier for people to engage on something, on a topic, and be collaborative. And then the last thing I will say is just changing the room and changing the chairs is often like a really big signal, right? If we just sit theater style, what happens is I sit down and then we skip a chair and then someone else sits down and then we all kind of like, we're in this just little box. I like just doing little quads of 4s, right? And they're just facing each other. It doesn't work for every session, but if we just send the signal, right, we're in a circle, we're in a small pod, we're in something. It's amazing how if I just sit down next to, Teri and Vinnu and we're just facing each other and there's just 4 of us, right? It's like we're at a little table anyway. It doesn't take a lot more effort to change the chairs or put in tables or something like that, as opposed to, you're watching the important person on the stage. You just sit here and watch. I think those are easy. That's what I would do.
Fantastic. All right, we are getting to the end of time, and I don't like to run over, as I know people have lots of moving parts in their day. So any last things that people just need to say before we finish up, or have we gotten at least part 1 all out on the table?
I think I have to just end with a quote, because that's just what I do, right? Mark Twain once said, "The secret to getting ahead is getting started." So just do something small that makes a little bit of a change to see what kind of difference it makes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Teri. Everyone else good to go? All right. Thank you so much to our panelists. I know if we were in an in-person setting, there would be a round of applause. So know that I am sending that to you in our virtual space emotionally through the screen. I do also want to give a big thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for being so engaged in the chat. Really have enjoyed keeping an eye out on all the amazing conversations happening. So thanks for taking time out of your day. Hope you can take something with you. We have a packed winter and spring of panels ahead of us. Please keep joining us for panels if you had a nice time. We have tons of topics related to associations in particular, but we also have kind of nonprofit panels, panels dedicated to fundraising and gratitude, and all sorts of other topics related to our mission-driven space. I recommend keeping an eye on the NX Unite website, NX Unite LinkedIn, or you can even find me on LinkedIn to kind of keep up with everything that is happening. Do quickly recommend that if you're going to be joining us for future panels, you make a free account on NX Unite. This is entirely free. What happens when you do that, though, is you start earning what's called cause coins when you attend these various events. And when you amass enough of those can be used for some free consultations with some of our friends in the industry and some discounts on industry software. So if you're going to be joining us anyway, I just want you to get that extra benefit. All right, that is it for me. Again, a really big thank you to everyone who has joined us here today, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your day. Thank you again, panelists. Bye.
Thanks so much, Colleen. Bye, y'all.
Bye.